And the reason it's not happening, multifold. $240 billion a year being spent in perverse subsidies to the conventional technologies. This notion that we have to have a balanced energy approach where we do all the conventional technologies, oh, and a few crumbs to the renewables. If you want modern energy services to the poor people, if you want to meet the UN Millennium Development Goals, which you will not at the rate we're on now, then we have to wholly reframe energy policy. The UN has got to stop lying to itself about, oh yeah, we can have coal and nuclear, carbon capture and sequestration. It's never been done commercially, but that would be a good thing to put money into. I went to UNDP in Kabul and I laid them out a plan for meeting the energy needs of Afghanistan. They were not interested in taking it up or pursuing it. And yeah, I can name names of who those people were. And I sat with Ismail Khan, the energy minister, and laid out to him what the best companies around the world are doing with energy efficiency, with renewable energy. He said, I would love to have that for my country. He said, but I can't, all of the international funding is going to Western contractors to supply last century's technologies. How many more meetings like this are we going to have where we sit in rooms like this at how much jet fuel burned to get here and keep talking about, gee, wouldn't it be nice? If this meeting wants to do something real, let's sit down with the technical experts who are here and lay out a strategy for actually meeting the energy needs of the world's people. Otherwise, thanks, I'm done. I got companies to work with.
On the other hand, I don't think we should be too hard on the UN because we may be a victim of over-expectation. The UN can't do everything. And you look at our budget and you look at our capacities, House, and sometimes I don't think the world has given us enough credit. I'm not an apologist for the organization, but we may be the beginning, not the end point. When we're here this week, we take valuable time of very busy people to take a close look at the issues. Now, they're not preparing a brief for the UN to follow. They're trying to exchange ideas on what is feasible, what is practical, and what may be doable by them. Where I think the UN has fallen short is not continued the effort down the line. It does not empower enough people to take charge of some of these activities, and so consequently we tend to become backlogged with all the reports and documents that we generate. Hunter, just to date myself, I've been to all of them. I was at Stockholm in '72. I was at Rio in '92. I was Johannesburg in 2002. And I know, but what we're trying to do is to get the world in touch with itself, to formulate a global agenda that is authoritative. I don't think the world gives the UN enough credit for the authority with which it speaks and the amount of knowledge it is able to accumulate. The question is, what do we do with it? I think we have an answer. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to, not surprisingly, follow up on what Hunter just said and on this notion about expectations. I think that we are and have been for some time in a situation where the world's most important problems having to do with the lives of the majority of the world's population have been considered to be the responsibility of two organizations, the United Nations and the World Bank. And whenever issues, I was at the Kennedy School for a long time, and not for a long time, for some time, but in places like that where you would think maybe some effort would be dedicated to those questions, usually it's, well, why don't we talk to the World Bank? Let's go find somebody at the UN. And that's a question of external perception. I'm not necessarily saying that the United Nations is responsible for that. However, what I think is become apparent over time is that, in the words of my friend Iqbal Kadir, the founder of Grameenphone, the bottleneck is at the top of the bottle. Which is to say that in most of the world's poorest places, governments at the national scale are as likely to be the problem as the solution. That's not an ideological point, it's an empirical point. Furthermore, there's a reason for that, which is the combination of narco-dependency, aid dependency, and resource dependency has a tendency to centralize power and undermine governance. In places where governance is undermined, people stay poor. So there's a systematic reason that over time, the countries that remain poor are the ones where governance is also poor. So that means that organizations that are structured around relations to governments at the national scale, regardless of the intelligence, capability, and the commitment of the people who work in them, will never be able to solve that problem. It's a systematic, structural problem. So what it means is the world community is giving the responsibility and has the expectation that two organizations that are structurally designed so that they will never be successful in accomplishing their goals are the ones that are expected to do the job. So that means that the only approach that will work is the one that Bernard Amadei talked about yesterday morning. The approach, what's so important about what Bernard was saying isn't so much engineers without borders. We have issues about scalability. We have issues about reach and scope. What's really important is what he said about the stealth approach, that you have to work directly with people who have ideas, who have intelligence, who have capabilities. Give them the resources working around governments at the national scale and allow them to grow and to provide the solutions that will create opportunities and expand rights. So that to me is, I mean, I wouldn't have gone on at such length except that I felt like the Hunter's comments required, maybe invited that sort of expanded follow-up. So that's what I have to say.
Veerle, you have a reaction?
Maybe very briefly complementing, I think, the good responses already is given before. And we are an intergovernmental organization, so we reflect, in fact, like you rightly say, what governments want, and then by consensus. But I think when you ask, Madam, how many meetings are we going to have? As far as I'm concerned, as many as needed. Because that's one of the issues the UN can do, is doing advocacy and shouting and screaming and calling attention to issues maybe the majority of the world doesn't want to address. But I want to just interject one word, is that, I feel that maybe, hopefully, the climate change challenge will for the first time give us, the global community, the opportunity to address in real terms this energy poverty issue. Because do admit, you were mentioning yourself, subsidies, political will, there is really no will to address the energy poverty issues. And as I was saying in my speech, we estimate that we will need between 20 and 30 trillion US dollars of energy investments between now and 2030. 1% is enough, to give to create the enabling environment to attract private business, to install energy in the rural areas. We don't do it. The UN, of course, has not 1% of 30 trillion, that I can assure you. I think the whole budget of the UN is much, much, much shorter. But in fact, if we would want to not spend the 1% on perverse subsidies, but really on creating the enabling environment to allow the private sector to go into the rural areas and deliver energy, we can do it. But we can only do it if the world community is giving to the UN the tools and the means to do it. And so I think it's a chicken and an egg situation. But with climate change, we will have to change our consumption and production patterns, because all of us is going to suffer, not only the poor people, but also the people here, in the United States and in my own home country. And when we start thinking about a new energy system, a new transport system, a new system, indeed, of lightning, it's incredible, but you're totally right. Don't look up, look down. But I think we will need sooner or later to do it. And the longer we wait, the more it will cost and the more we will suffer. And I hope that for the first time, in working for 25 years for the UN, for the first time I believe that maybe the climate change problem will give us the opportunity to transform economies and to give energy access to the poor. But okay, I keep on hoping. That's why I work for the UN.
I think there's something in that argument, because the climate issue provides the planet with the first universal human calamity. No one can escape. No one can take refuge anyplace else. And energy is a key part of the solution. And I think sustainable energy futures may be very closely linked to the whole way in which you address the climate problem. And then again, energy for the poor may come in.